Back to the Future has some pretty interesting time. It's kind of like Men in Black 3, except for the fact that the timeline never splits. In this movie, you can go back and change time at all, and you just pop out in the same future. They clearly weren't thinking with science first in this movie, were they? So, Professor Doc himself comes up with a time machine, and I'm pretty sure they didn't explain it, but I'm pretty sure it's theorized that there's like some weird barrier around time that we can't interact with. So he comes up with a device powered by plutonium, such a wonderful element that uses 1.21 gigawatts of energy to quite literally break through the time barrier. And Marty uses this on complete accident, and it goes back in time. It accidentally goes back to the 1950s because they had just set a random date into the time clock. It's quite inconvenient. So Marty ends up back in the past, 1950, where he goes on some shenanigans that don't have anything to do with time. But when he realizes, oh God, I gotta get back to the future. funny. So when he realizes he has to get back to the future, he goes back to the old Doc, because Doc is like in his 80s. He's pretty old. He goes to see old Doc in the 50s, and Doc kind of knows what's happening with time travel because he came up with the idea for time travel in 1950. So he's like, hey Marty, I'll help you out, but we need to get 1.21 gigawatts, and we're in the 50s, and there's nothing here that will get us that much. That isn't under the tight control of the government. So they decide to use lightning. So, beautiful DeLorean. They need lightning to strike the clock tower, and historically it happened just a week before Marty even showed up. How convenient. So they hook up a wire, and they need the car to reach 88 miles per hour at the same exact time it hits the wire with this little hook thing. That's pretty hard to pull off, but they do it. So lightning strikes the clock tower, and it goes down the wire, hits the car, ignites the engine, manages to give a ton of energy, and then breaks through time. Beautiful. Makes fire go everywhere. Beautiful shot. But we don't really know how it worked. Except the next morning he wakes up and his family's different. His mom never smoked like he told her to, and his dad was a successful author because just like Marty told him, he should write books and be creative. Their big bully man, Biff, is now their little like workman. He works for them, he cleans their cars, and it's like it doesn't seem like it's a split timeline, but it is a split timeline, and I'm just confused. Like, so we're assuming that the timeline, instead of being like a tree where it splits off every time there's a change, the timeline's more like a river, where something goes back and blocks it, it comes back around, it still flows the same way. It's just kind of different because the rock disrupted the water. This is such a bad analogy, but this movie does not really focus on science, if that wasn't clear by the fact that if you mess up time, you just start to disappear. So that is the review for our #1 candidate, Back to the Future.